Hello, everybody. Welcome to Medicine and Science on the Pod TV network. I'm Nick Palavita. I will not be your host for today, but I will be definitely listening to in because we're going to be discussing MNRA, which is hitting the internet in the United States and all over the world. What is it? What does it stand for? And why are the anti-vaxxers attacking it when Russia and my university, which I'm going to give a plug for, the University of Miami, where I went to law school, have developed or are developing vaccines using this technology to basically eradicate cancer. And so here you've got this great weapon, and then you have what I call the anti-vaxxers, which to me, I don't know if they even went to biology class. If they did, they certainly didn't graduate, number one. But we do have a board certified person who's board certified in internal medicine who can explain MNRA to our audience and to myself so we know it a little bit better and what it can do to actually move people forward, especially it looks like it has some great applications to eliminating cancer, let alone COVID-19. So with that, we're bringing in Dr. Michael Patness, who is a real doctor, not like RFK, who is playing like he's a doctor, and he's a lawyer like myself, an environmental lawyer, who probably did take, like I did, biology in high school, and that was it. And now pretends to be an expert in health. So not that I'm against RFK. I think he'd be great in environmental law, but he doesn't belong in the hard sciences. That's not his thing. So Dr. Patness, the floor is yours. Let's find out what's going on.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you again for the opportunity and the privilege to spend a few minutes with you. Yes, I'm Michael Patmos. I'm a board-certified internal medicine physician. I have added qualifications in infection control and hospital epidemiology. And oh, by the way, I also have a master's degree in biochemistry. So nucleic acids is something I studied when I was in graduate school. So this is an area about which I can speak with some credibility. So I'm going to do something that is pretty Herculean. I'm going to explain the whole mRNA thing in 15 minutes or less. So here we go. First of all, messenger, it's mRNA, stands for ribonucleic acid, messenger RNA, ribonucleic acid. So here's the sad thing. Robert Kennedy just gutted research for messenger RNA-based vaccines, both for infectious diseases and for cancers. This is a shutdown, basically shutting down research. They also took the messenger RNA COVID vaccine and made it available, approved it only for people 65 and older, making it less available for people under 65. They have to have a comorbidity and get a letter from a doctor in most locations, and basically kind of restricting it. So they have restricted access to messenger RNA vaccines and have gutted research for further research for mRNA vaccines. This is a real tragedy because these vaccines, the messenger RNA vaccines, won the Nobel Prize. Dr. Carrico and Weissman from the University of Pennsylvania won the Nobel Prize for this innovation. The messenger RNA vaccine is, in my opinion, and the opinion of many, one of the greatest accomplishments in the history of science. It's a breakthrough innovation because it actually offers a superior vaccination mechanism. Why is it better? It's better because it's very specific. It's not like a live virus or a live attenuated virus that's injected into you where you get a whole bunch of junk proteins and all kind of molecules. This is one molecule. So it's very narrow. It's very specific. It produces a brisk immune response, and then it goes away. There's nothing left behind from the vaccine. And it's highly effective. The messenger RNA COVID vaccine has been proven to be about 90 to 95% effective at its primary goal, which is to prevent death. There's a lot of confusion. People think that, well, it doesn't stop you from getting COVID. It might not. It's only about 30 to 40% effective at stopping you from getting COVID. But that's not the purpose of the vaccine. The purpose of the vaccine is to stop you from dying. And for that, it's extremely effective. And there's very good evidence of that. It's also extremely safe. There's not a single confirmed case in the United States of anyone who's died from the COVID mRNA vaccine, despite the claims made by people using VAERS data inappropriately. Well, anyhow, What is mRNA? Where did it come from? First of all, messenger RNA is a natural substance. We have messenger RNA in our body. Every living thing has messenger RNA and transfer RNA in their cells. So we have to go back to basic biology now. In every, what does mRNA do? So here's in a process called protein synthesis, transcription and translation and generation of protein. So here's what happens in every body, whether you're a human or an octopus or a pine tree, you have cells. In each cell, there is a nucleus. Inside the nucleus is where your DNA is housed. Your DNA is like your master blueprint. It's like the hard drive that contains your code for who you are, and every protein in your body is coded for in the DNA, which is housed in your nucleus. The DNA does not leave the nucleus, it stays there. But the information in that DNA is transcribed and brought out of the nucleus and into the cytoplasm, the rest of the cell, where it's then part of a process called protein synthesis. So that process where you go from DNA to RNA is called transcription. And then when it goes from RNA to protein is called translation. And there are two kinds of RNA. There's messenger RNA, which actually carries the information, and there's transfer RNA, which actually takes the information and puts it on the ribosome to build the protein. So this RNA is a natural substance that we all have in our bodies. You consume every time you eat anything, you're consuming RNA that's part of the whatever you're consuming. So it's not like somebody invented RNA. RNA was discovered shortly after DNA was discovered in 1952 by Watson and Crick, who, by the way, won a Nobel Prize for their discovery of the structure of DNA. Once we found out what DNA was, additional research in the 1950s, they could say, oh, here's what RNA is. So RNA is a natural substance. It's always been there. It's been around forever. It's part of our natural biology. No one invented RNA. Over the years, it became pretty clear. Well, actually, no, it was DNA that was discovered by Watson and Crick. Over the years, the use of RNA, it became apparent that RNA could be used as a drug to make cells make proteins that we want them to make. That kind of research was going on for years, going back to the 1960s and 70s. Research around DNA and RNA had been ongoing in many labs all around the world. One such lab where that research was being done was at the Salk Institute at the University of California, San Diego. One of the leading researchers in the world at that time, a giant of nucleic acid research, DNA and RNA research, was Dr. Inder Verma, Verma. He's now retired and long gone. He was a giant in that field. Another physician who was very big in that field, actually not a physician, a researcher, Dr. Philip Felgner, was at he was a PhD. Both Verma and Felgner were PhDs, researchers. Verma at UCSD, Felgner at Syntex in Palo Alto. And one of the areas of research at that time, back in those days, was trying to figure out how to get this synthetic mRNA into the cells. So Felder invented this thing called lipofectin, which is basically a fat globule. And he found that if you put DNA in a fat globule and then you injected it into the cell of a mouse, the mouse absorbed the DNA and then out came a protein. So he realized, hey, this is a way we can actually teach cells how to make proteins, specific proteins that we want them to make. And then he wrote in his paper in 1985 or 86 in Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences that this could be used not only for DNA, but for RNA and other nucleotides. So that was where the idea for trying to inject messenger RNA in a fat globule came from. It came from Dr. Felgner. He invented lipofectin. Verma was working, it's Felgner, Felgner. Verma was working on this in his laboratory. He had a very big lab at UCSD. at the Salk Institute, and he had grant money. He had all these grants, and he had an army of graduate students who would come into his lab and work for him, doing the research that he wanted them to do under his direction. Enter Robert Malone. Now, Robert Malone, gets credit today for a major contributor to this work. Well, what was Robert Malone doing at the time? He was a kid in his 20s. He had just graduated from UCSD with a master's degree in biology. He was in an MD PhD program, and his PhD advisor was Dr. Verma. So along with many other graduate students, Malone was one of many who worked in Dr. Verma's lab on Dr. Verma's research with using Dr. Verma's reagents and equipment and laboratory on Dr. Verma's dime. It was his grant money to do research that Dr. Verma was directing. That research was using Feldner's lipofectin to experiment with introducing mRNA into cells. And Malone did the research under the direction of his supervisor and conducted the research, did the pipetting and so forth, and actually conducted the research where he was able to show that, yes, you could put mRNA into mouse cells, I believe it were mouse cells, and it would produce a protein. Bingo, we now have the first demonstration of lipofection, the process of transferring mRNA into cells, producing a protein. We now have the basis of using mRNA as a drug, as a therapy that could be used to produce proteins for all kinds of things like vaccines, to treat cancer, so on. It's an infinite number of applications. Malone, being the student, got to write the paper. The student's name goes first on the paper, by the way. The professor's name goes last. That's how it is. That's by convention in science. So Malone gets to write the paper, and it appears in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences that describes this process. Well, here we are now, fast forward 40 years later, Malone, presents this as if this was his work, that he invented this, that he was the inventor. And people have just repeated that, because his name is on the paper. They haven't gone back to actually look at what was Malone's status at the time. He was a student working in his professor's lab. The ideas all came from Verma and Feldner. Malone was the guy doing the work. Now, what happened to Malone at UCSD at that time was, he's a very smart fella, and he saw the potential that this had of being an enormous breakthrough. It could be extremely lucrative. So he wrote a patent application. This is all on his website, by the way. He authored a patent application listing his name as the primary inventor. And that was found. It actually didn't get submitted. He wrote it. It got caught. Feldner crossed Malone's name out. It's right on Malone's website, and put his name over it, obviously. Malone did end up with his name on the patent in the last position. In a patent, the first name is the primary inventor, and then the order of names in a patent, you get less and less and less of the contribution. So the last name is usually the least important person in the process. Malone's name is on that patent, but it's in the last position. But what happened was Malone tried to take credit for the research. He basically wanted to claim it was his research. And to this day, he gets away with that. And everybody just sort of, well, I guess it was his research. He invented the technology. No, he didn't invent the technology. Feldner invented lipofection and lipofectin. He donated the lipofectin to Verma's lab. Malone gave credit to Feldner in the paper, saying this is courtesy of Dr. Feldner. And it's the grant, right? If you read the paper, it says right where the grant came from. The grant money came from Verma. So Malone was the student, and he wanted to take credit for it. He got caught. So he got booted out of the program, and he ended up just finishing his MD, never got a PhD. He stayed just with his master's degree. But here we are 40 years later now. Malone, what happens is COVID comes along. There's all these people, thousands of researchers who've been working on messenger RNA all the way along, including Carrico and Weissman. They developed a messenger RNA-based vaccine. It shows great promise. it gets approved for emergency use. And all of a sudden, bingo, in 2020, within a few months of that vaccine being announced, there are some skeptics that popped up, but no skeptic carries the weight of authority more than Robert Malone. After all, he came out in June of 2020, popped up out of nowhere and said, hey, I invented this. I am the world's authority on this, and it is bad. And he went on this public, he went all around the world. He came to Maui. That's how I first encountered him, where he gave a talk about these vaccines. And so even though there's other critics of messenger RNA, it's really Dr. Malone who carries his voice is of the anti-mRNA folks. His voice is the loudest. His credibility is the strongest. He is the main person shaping the anti-mRNA narrative. And now he sits on the CDC Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. He's directly in the ear of Robert F. Kennedy, and he's one of the most important sources of information upon which Robert Kennedy relies. And that's really tragic because he's not the inventor of this technology. And someone needs to, I wrote a paper explaining exactly how he was a student in the process, not the inventor. And I wish that story would be picked up by others in the media. Robert Malone's role has been extremely exaggerated, heavily embellished. It's not what he claims it is. The tragedy here is that this mRNA-based vaccine technology is an enormous innovation, a fantastic breakthrough. This is a highly advanced mechanism for a vaccine. It offers the promise, not only has it saved millions of lives around the world from COVID, it offers the promise to be produced into vaccines for other infectious diseases and for other diseases that are not infectious diseases, even cancer. And by gutting research, what we have done is we have just pulled the plug on one of the most important innovations in the history of humanity, in the history of science. When I was at a course at Harvard a couple of years ago, the comment was made that this is a messenger RNA-based vaccine technology is one of the 5 most important breakthroughs in recent memory in medicine and science, and it's been taken away from us because of false information from someone who claims he invented it, but he was really just a student working in the lab. So that's the story of messenger RNA, and I pray that this will get through this, and messenger RNA-based vaccine technology will go back to having research. All of this research is going to move overseas. Other countries are not going to make the same kind of regressive step that we're making in the United States. So that in a little over about 15 minutes is the whole mRNA story, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, what you just said at the last, I thought was very important because that's what I'm getting is the other countries are picking up the mRNA research. And Russia just made a big claim that they have this new mRNA research that cures cancer. But that's just Russia. Also some of the universities, like University of Florida, has come out with some mRNA vaccines against cancer, and so has the University of Miami. So here is what we're going to see, the medical research. And by the way, I did look at University of Miami. I had to look at the U because I went there. And part of their funding was from NIH. They had like 400 million from other sources. And then they had 127 million from NIH to develop the vaccine that basically cures cancer. So what is going to happen? Are these other countries going to get these vaccines, patent these vaccines, and basically exploit these vaccines against the people of the United States because of the anti-vax movement?
So what's happening is because of RFK and Malone and others, Peter McCullough is another cardiologist who doesn't have any background in this at all, who's attacking mRNA, but there are others. There are some in Europe as well. But I think Malone is he's the main architect of the anti-mRNA rhetoric. In any case, all of this gutting of mRNA research and this public relations campaign. mRNA is like, people, just the average person on the street thinks it's poisonous because that's what they've been told. So what's happening is companies like Moderna and Pfizer and other companies that are engaged in research with mRNA as a vaccine and as an all that research is going to have to be moved overseas. They're already starting to move their operations overseas. I was reading recently, there's even, some movement of this technology and this innovation, this research innovation is moving not only to Europe, but also to third world countries, including in Africa, which will be a great benefit to these other countries. In addition to the companies like Moderna moving their production and research facilities overseas, the scientists who do this work are all fleeing in massive numbers. There's all kinds of jobs being created for them in France and other places, and they're leaving the United States. So what has happened is the United States was the world's leader in biomedical research, and that capacity is now being gutted and it's moving overseas. So I think what we're going to see, unless something is done to turn this around, in a few years, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, other countries will be the world's leaders in this kind of research, and we'll have basically taken a step back. We'll have become like a primitive country with respect to research in this area. It's really a tragedy. We've taken one of our greatest strengths, biomedical research, and basically gutted it and shipped it abroad. If that's not making America great, that's not making America healthy. That's returning America back to the 1800s.
Hey, Dr. Patmos, just really quickly, I was curious. I was listening to some of the show, and this isn't so much about Moderna, but this is the time that kids are going back to school. And I did hear our favorite person is talking about the vaccines and even some of the research around autism and stuff like that. But I was just wondering your take on how we are doing as a nation in terms of making sure that our children are vaccinated. As everybody on this network knows, I don't have any of my own, but I do have 2 nephews that are about to be college age, because one of them is a senior in high school and everything. But I just wanted your take on how we're doing in terms of vaccinations.
Yeah, that's a great question. The United States led the world in promoting vaccination, and we had mandatory vaccination rules for children in school, with rare exceptions for allergies and so forth. And then we added these other vaccine exemptions for religious purposes and then for personal preferences in many locations. And it varies a little bit from state to state. But the reality is we had achieved very high levels of vaccination in the United States. You have to have 95% of the population. There's a mathematical basis for this, but you have to have about 95% of the population vaccinated in order to prevent a disease outbreak. And we achieved that for many decades. We had that with measles, mumps, and rubella and so forth. That's why you don't see these diseases very much in the United States. Well, vaccination rates have declined because of Robert Kennedy and children's self-defense and Physicians for Informed Consent and all this PR against vaccines. Vaccination rates have declined, and Trump has said he wants to end mandatory vaccination programs. In Florida, Dr. Ladapo has announced that Florida is going to end all mandatory school vaccination for children. So basically, we're turning back the clock. We're going the opposite direction. We're now reducing vaccine requirements. And so what we're seeing is vaccination rates are declining from 95% down to 90%. We're down in the 80s now. Some locations in some counties in Florida, it's down as low as 60%. Other locations, certain states and certain parts of certain states have vaccination rates that are really rapidly declining. And what will happen when you have declining vaccination rates, you have resurgence of disease. The microbes are out there. They're just waiting for an opportunity. And an unvaccinated person, the microbes will find that person like a heat-seeking missile. And so what we're seeing as the vaccination rates go down, contagious infectious diseases go up. We're now seeing in the United States a return of measles and polio and whooping cough, and soon diphtheria. You'll see diphtheria again pretty soon. If you've never seen a case of diphtheria, you're in for a surprise. There's a reason they call it the strangling angel of children. It's an awful disease, and it will soon be back in the United States because of the decline in vaccination. This is one of the greatest, saddest stories of public health, is the unraveling of our vaccination effort. It was one of our greatest achievements, and we just unraveled it.
Yeah, Dr. Patmos, some of the arguments I've seen on the internet were this. Congress apparently as all taking money from the pharmaceutical companies. And hence, the arguments are that Congress is conflicted when it comes to mRNA research. However, who does the research? Is it Congress who's doing the research, or is it our universities that are doing the research on mRNA doctrine, on mRNA technology? So who is doing the research? Is it Congress or is it the universities?
Okay, so most of the research in the United States up until now has been funded by the National Institutes of Health. They get funding from the taxpayers. Pharmaceutical companies can also chip in and fund research. Those funds flow to an academic setting, like the labs at the NIH or the labs at the University of Miami or the labs at University of Pennsylvania or Harvard or the University of Nevada School of Medicine in Reno, wherever there's research going on. These research funds flow down to the level of the laboratory, where there are strong protections against any kind of bias or interference from the pharmaceutical company. They don't conduct the research. The money is given to the university, and they say, here, use this money to do research in this area. They don't tell the researchers what they want, what kind of outcome they want. If they were to do that, that would be highly unethical. There's a board, that oversees all of this to make sure that the research is conducted, ethically, without bias, and the results come out the way the results come out. If it's favorable for the drug companies, results are then good. If it's not, it's not. And they fund a lot of research that doesn't benefit them. So the notion that there's this, overwhelming corruption is mythology. There's just as much money flowing into the anti-vax folks from industry, the health food industry and the vitamin industry and the wellness industry. They're funding all the anti-vax stuff. So it's the same thing, just on the other side.
Mm-hmm. All right. So the thing is, there are arguments that the pharmaceutical industry is corrupting the research. It's just basically not true. Would that be correct?
It's called an IRB. It's an institutional review board. Any organization that does research has to have an IRB in order to have funding. The IRB are independent people who oversee the research to make sure that it's properly done and executed without bias. So you're basically, what's missing is an understanding of the IRB process, what an IRB is. The IRB you can't get your project approved at a university unless the IRB signs off on it and they monitor it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the thing is, the Congress, all they do, to my knowledge, is that they fund the National Institute of Health or they fund the CDC, and then that's it. So they are not directly involved in the research, development, or the outcome of the events whatsoever. So this whole theory that there's this big conspiracy is just all bogus by the anti-vaxxers. It's all fake.
It's all bogus. It's good fodder, and it's chum for the base. It's the kind of thing that some blue collar person will say, "Oh my God," and get all riled up about it. It's a good way to rile up the base to vote. The reality is, there's nobody in Congress. There are a few physicians in Congress, but there's nobody in Congress who has any background in any of this. Most Congress people are just kind of average citizens. Maybe they have a bachelor's degree. They're insurance salesmen and real estate investors and stockbrokers. They don't know anything about any of this stuff, so they wouldn't understand that if it was put in front of them, they have to be explained to them. But yes, Congress funds the NIH. The NIH then funds the research activities. All those research activities are overseen under the auspices and supervision of the IRB at the universities.
Yeah. Okay. So it just answers what my thoughts are. All this talk about conspiracy theories is all fake, Meatball. It's like it's all like the WWE. It's all fake, but there's absolutely no truth behind it. And what you see in Congress is just a parade of funny business, but not the real business of science. And no matter what they say or do, at the end, the results matter. And it looks like the results are coming out of our universities are very positive. And if the university here don't do it, they're going to do it overseas. I mean,
what we're doing is we're denying the American public and humanity of a breakthrough innovation that won a Nobel Prize because it's superior. Right. And we're denying that innovation to the world because somebody feels they didn't get credit for it.
Right. That's ridiculous. But anyway, we would like to thank Dr. Michael Patmos, who is board certified in internal medicine. I didn't know you had a background also in chemistry as well, biochemistry, which is pretty cool. And we'd like to thank our viewers in the United States and around the world, especially the medical doctors who are watching this as they're getting their visas ready to move overseas and move their it's too easy to move their operations in Europe or other place and do all the development work outside the U.S. as opposed to in the U.S. And we'll see you next week on Medicine Science on the Pod TV Network. Take care. Bye-bye.